What's happening, guys? Arouge again, and today we're talking about the respiratory system. Just like I said, for the digestive system, the big idea is to put molecules into your blood from the food that you eat. The big idea for respiratory is to put oxygen into your blood. We want that oxygen to go in our blood, and we want the carbon dioxide to leave our blood. We want that to be taken out, okay? So that's the big idea. If we go over the structures of the respiratory system, first we have the nasal cavity. It's this opening right here. When you take a breath through your nose, that's where the air is going into. Connected to the nasal cavity, we have another cavity down here, and this cavity is simply your throat. The fancy way to say your throat is the pharynx, okay? And the pharynx is connecting the nasal and oral cavity to the esophagus, okay? So the pharynx is simply just your throat. Make sure you get this in your notes, anything that has the pencil. Next, we have the larynx. The larynx, I remember L in larynx is lower than the pharynx, and that's simply your voice box, and that houses your vocal cords. Just below your larynx, you have this pipe, this tube, that's called your trachea. And if you notice, the trachea has a special look to it. It's ringed with cartilage. And the reason why it has cartilage is if it were soft tissue, if it didn't have that cartilage and it was soft tissue, then when you take a breath, that pipe would collapse in on itself, okay? So that cartilage keeps that windpipe open when you breathe in, okay? Also, if you look at the inside of the trachea, it has these little tiny structures called cilia. And cilia does kind of look like the villi that we saw in the digestive system, but it has this different function to it. The cilia secretes like a mucus. So when you take a breath in, and if you inhale any particles, the cilia and the mucus will trap those particles. And the cilia will constantly move, they constantly flip upward. Okay, they're on all around your trachea. They constantly flip upward, and they're going to beat those dust particles upward out of your respiratory tract. Okay, so the cilia is basically like almost like a filter. Okay, to make sure that there's no dust or debris that goes down this way. Okay, so what we have, because we covered the esophagus and digestion, the esophagus is this little tube right here. It's soft tissue. Right in front of it, you have the trachea, and you can see it's much wider, and it has those rings for cartilage, okay, or of cartilage. Now, what stops the food that you swallow from entering your windpipe, since they're so close to each other, is you have this flap. This flap right here is called the epiglottis. And when you swallow something, when you swallow your food, or that bolus, the epiglottis is going to close off that opening into the trachea, okay? And that makes sure that literally your food goes down the correct tube. So the epiglottis covers the trachea when swallowing. Make sure you get that in your notes, please. Next, we have the bronchi. Bronchi is actually a plural word. It's these two tubes that are branching off the trachea. Okay, so we have the trachea, branches off in the two bronchi. Singular is pronounced bronchus. If I want to refer to either the left or right side, I would use the word bronchus. Okay? And if you look at the bronchi further branches out into tinier branches we call bronchioles. Okay? So all of these right here, these are the bronchioles. Okay? If we were to go to the very end of a bronchiole, if we were to go to the very end and zoom in on it, okay, it would look like this. We would see at the very end of the bronchioles, we have these pouches. Kind of looks like grapes on a vine. This is the very end, and these are called alveoli. The alveoli is where we get gas exchange. Remember, back to the big idea, I said we want to take in oxygen into our blood. We want to get carbon dioxide out of our blood. The alveoli is where this occurs at, okay? if you look closer at the alveoli, you'll notice that they're wrapped in capillaries, okay? They're wrapped in blood vessels. And what happens, so we have the alveoli right here. We have a blood vessel that's wrapped around it, and what's happening is through simple diffusion, okay? Just like when I spray the aerosol can in class, through simple diffusion, there's a high concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood starting off, and that's going to diffuse outward into the alveoli. There's a high concentration of oxygen in the alveoli, and that's going to diffuse towards a low concentration, which is in your blood. So this is where we get our gas exchange, okay? It's in the alveoli. How does the oxygen transport, once it's in your blood, how does it get transported throughout your whole body? Well, you have these red blood cells, okay? And the red blood cells have a special protein called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is very, very rich in iron. And that iron and the hemoglobin transports the oxygen throughout your whole body, okay? So hemoglobin is a protein that is found in red blood cells, and hemoglobin contains iron, okay? And the last thing that I want to cover is simply your diaphragm. The way you actually breathe, the way that air is actually getting pulled into your lungs, is I want you to picture this syringe. If I pull this plunger down, if I pull that plunger down, what's going to happen to the inside of the syringe? It's going to fill up with air, okay? The same concept happens with your diaphragm. This muscle right here, this is your diaphragm, and when it contracts, it pulls downward. When that pulls downward, it creates a vacuum, and the air goes down into your lungs, okay? So when you breathe in, the diaphragm goes down. When you exhale, the diaphragm actually goes back up, okay? And that is it for today, and I will catch you guys next time. See ya.